Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, and joining me today is a returning guest making their second appearance here on the channel. Now, if you remember this guest, he's often found in his garage gym or the mountains where he lives when he isn't writing his epic fantasy series. A virtual fitness professional by trade, he integrates his creative passions into movement, training with maces, clubs, staves, and swords to unlock his inner gladiator. And if you had the opportunity to meet him at the Arizona Renaissance Fair, you would have seen him dressed in his gladiator attire, which I absolutely love and really honed into that warrior spirit. And as I mentioned before, my guest loves stories more than writing, reading, gaming, playing music, hiking, and paddleboarding. And if he's not working on his story, he's helping others develop theirs as an author coach. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to a returning guest, author coach, an all around amazing individual, as well as award winning author, Tim Facciola. Tim, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for a wonderfully warm introduction, but just having me back on in general. Always a pleasure, Gabriel.
Awesome, Tim. Awesome. So, as just a little refresher for our viewers and listeners, especially if this is their first time seeing you, can you give us a little update of what you've been up to since the last time you were on the show?
Oh, it's been a blur, right? So, in the last year and a half, I've published 4 books now. I rapid released the entirety of the Eventual Realm trilogy, which is now an award-winning series, not just an award-winning book, but an award-winning series as of this past weekend. I also released the prequel novel, which is a dark fantasy standalone, Ghosts of Rania. So that was super fun as well. That just came out in January of 2025. There's been, a couple different author conferences that I've gotten the opportunity to speak at and lecture at, which was a very fun and rewarding experience. And then, going to, events like the Renaissance Fair or, different Comic-Con conventions or bookish events, getting out into the community. I have a book club that I'll be starting up later in April. So depending on the airtime of this, we're looking at April 19th. We're going to be beginning with one of my books, and then we'll also have another read that we'll be going through as well, side by side. And I'm just really looking forward to it. It's such a wonderful community, the author and reader space, and so many different unique life experiences, and everyone's very articulate and willing to engage at a deeper level. So that's what I love.
Awesome. That is incredible, Tim. And also, for our viewers and listeners, can you give us a brief overview of your series, just as a refresher for those, again, making their official watch of this interview?
Sure. Yeah. So the Eventual Realm trilogy is kind of like Gladiator meets Game of Thrones in a world of magic, mythology, and warring gods. So if you're familiar with Spartacus's rebellion from Rome, it's kind of like that. It's kind of mixed with Kratos's war against the gods from God of War. If you played those games back on PlayStation 2 in the early 2000s, kind of pulls from that, and then has the political intrigue of a Game of Thrones. So a uh, a and Gladiator is enslaved. He has amnesia. He's trying to figure out where he is in the world. He has this prophecy. He doesn't know what it means, and he gets kind of recruited to serve a prince to figure out who is plotting anarchy. If he exposes these zealots, he'll earn his freedom. But in doing so, the more as his memories return, as his prophecy starts to become more clear of what it could mean, he realizes that his freedom isn't enough. So in order to fulfill his destiny, fulfill his fate. He has to let go of this vengeance that he wants to have on society. So that's kind of the big gist of entering into the series. And then the standalone prequel, I'd say, is more dark fantasy. And that's one of the characters who is in the Eventual Realm trilogy. Um, it's a sister-sister dynamic. So whether I usually pitch it as like the sister-sister dynamic of Arcane, if people have watched Arcane, and if people don't know what Arcane is, then I say Frozen, because everyone knows Frozen. But the sister-sister dynamic of Frozen, but instead of a world of ice, it's a world where nothing truly dies, and therefore
Mm.
nothing truly lives. And this cursed world is ruled by a blood magic wielding skeleton king. And one sister wants to lead a rebellion to depose said skeleton king, and the other sister wants to lead an exodus to get as many people away from the curse, and therein lies the crux of the conflict. So a lot of emotional, a lot of emotional conflict and tension, familial friction. So very, very, that's a much heavier read, much more emotionally traumatic.
Absolutely. And also, I can see right behind you at the very top in those frames, those are also the covers of
Yes,
your books, correct? Which, if I remember correctly, the one on the far, well, the way I'm seeing it, my left, with the guy kneeling, that would be the first book in the series, correct?
correct. Yes. So, well, all four make, you see this spine image, it all comes together.
Yes.
So I feel like people need to see I began with the end in mind. But yeah, so book one, a little closer up look
Ooh, I
we have
love
here.
that. Absolutely love that.
And then books two, kind of continuing with that kneeling theme with a little spectral ghosty thing going on here. Um, Continuing the theme, a little bit more dark and desperation going on as we enter into a book entitled The Age of the End. So, of course, that's not going to be all that. And then Ghosts of Rania, which is the standalone, the dark fantasy standalone prequel. And this one might actually be my favorite cover, but they all make me very happy. So I'm very proud. And very always pleased. Freya at Lunaris Falcon Book Design did all of my covers, and I always love to give her a shout out.
Awesome. That's amazing, Tim. And I'm glad to see, there's been a huge outpour of love and support for, this series. And, I'm staying up to date with all of your socials and seeing all the stuff you've been doing, which, again, I want to say is huge and incredible to you. And you deserve all the credit you and your team get. So, looking back on your success thus far, have you ever thought of like, man, like how did I really come to love, reading and storytelling? I think you may have answered this before, but would you like to share it with our viewers and listeners?
Sure. Yeah, I think I really do believe that we as humans are wired for story. We like that is how we communicate. That is how we make meaning of the world around us. And it for me, the first book series that I really, really got hooked on was the Animorphs. One of those Scholastic Book Fair.
Mm-hmm.
And it had the covers where it goes from teenage kid turning into an animal, and I was hooked from there. And that's like a 64 book series with you know other standalone add-ons and all these different things, and I just ate that up and loved it. And then I always had an affinity for fantasy, specifically fantasy and sci-fi. But stories in general, I learned to just gain a deeper and deeper appreciation of, especially as I started to want to write. So studying story structure, and it gives such a profound depth behind like, this, like you can almost read between the lines and see the creative intent. And when you start looking at that, it just gives you a more profound desire to create at such a level. So one hand washes the other. The more you read, the more you want to write, and the more you write, the better. Like it changes the way you read. So it's a really unique relationship in that regard. And yeah, once you get that bug, it's really hard to you can't turn it off. You can't engage with any type of story without that mindset anymore.
Absolutely. And then, from your initial trilogy to now the prequel standalone novel, I'm actually very curious, Tim. Did your goals into this prequel novel change as opposed to the goals from your trilogy, as well as your promise to your not only your established readers of your trilogy, but also your future readers who may be picking this up as their first book as a window into your established trilogy?
Yeah, so it was really interesting because the way in which this came about, like the publishing order and the writing order weren't the same, right? So
Mm.
while I had finished this one and this was like finished drafting this, book one was with my editor. And so I was like, well, what should I do in the meantime? She's like, start working on something totally different. And I started working on this. Um,
Oh, okay.
so once upon a time, this prequel was it was a story that was cut from book one. This whole character was cut from book one. Um, and I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll give her her own thing and explore it that way. And it ended up coming, back into the fold at a later date. But this was supposed to be a disconnected story. It wasn't supposed to be so interconnected. And that ended up being kind of a blessing and a curse in a way. A blessing in the sense that because it was originally part of, and then I separated it, um, there was always the ability to intertwine, interconnect, and create a natural segue. The challenge with that was I wanted a second entry point into the series. So, you can't, if I, labeled this as book four, for example, like you need to read the story first, then go back in the prequel. Well, it doesn't serve as a second entryway.
Okay.
So I wrote these in such a way that you could read just Ghost of Rainier and never read the trilogy, and you'd still have a completed story arc. Or you could read books one, two, and three, never read the prequel, and still have a complete catharsis from that story. And that was important to me. I wanted like less barriers to entry for my stories. I feel like in fantasy, um, the way certain storytellers are going, where everything's an interconnected world, and like Marvel really made this, like brought this to the forefront of how a lot of creators are operating nowadays, where it's all an interconnected IP. Brandon Sanderson has done the same thing with his Cosmere.
Hmm.
These multiverses of how things interconnect. But the challenge I've had as a fan of those fandoms is that, well, there's so much content coming out so quickly. And if I didn't read that or I didn't watch that, then I won't understand this, or I won't feel like I can get at like a complete story out of that. And that began to like almost frustrate me um, in some regards. So I wanted something that was accessible, that still kept to like the tone and the intent that my stories have. And that tone and intent is, my stories are dark, but I never want my readers to lose faith that there is hope throughout the story.
Mm.
Like all the stories are always oriented towards hope, resilience and perseverance through the darkness of the stories. Not the, like, sometimes with dark fantasy, we're left in this nihilistic state of, and nothing matters and no one ever changes. And it's just, that does not work with my worldview. So I wanted to remain true to that belief in the human spirit, while still having um, accessible stories that you could begin here or begin there, and not spoil one another, and be able to enjoy them separately, together, in this order or in that order. And I'm very proud that I have effectively done that, and that's something that I definitely take great pride in.
Absolutely. And it's also, from what you're telling me, it almost seems like, these stories, they exist in the same universe and they tell more or less the same story, but they are completely separate. As you said, you can just read the prequel novel, get an entire idea of the world, and that's it. You don't have to read anything further. Same thing with the trilogy. It has the world, it has the buildup, it tells you the dangers and so forth, and you can never read it again. So it is kind of, and we could talk about this later, the difficulties of where does this establish in the canon that I've made with my first series? Is this technically the unofficial fourth book in this series? Is it the start of a new series, or is it just in my series of books that is the fourth book that's set in this universe, but it's not tied to any, it's just exists? And that is, I think, for all authors, among the many things to discuss and really contemplate. Okay, where does this exactly go? And then from that point, what was the overall reaction and feedback like from your family and friends, as well as your established readers who read the trilogy and now are reading this prequel novel?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So when I did a an arc read book club for Ghosts of Rainia.
Mm,
So before it came out, got a group of people together and said, hey, we're going to do this thing a little differently. We're going to read it together. We're going to meet. We're going to talk about it. We're going to analyze it. We're going to bring up some things. And some people had read the trilogy, and other people were just coming in, had no knowledge of the trilogy. This was the first book of mine that they were reading, and having that dynamic of like, okay, don't want to give any spoilers. We don't want to talk about this, but I want to kind of let these people know that there is more should they want to go on. So
mm,
that was super fun, to have these types of conversations and really get into it. A lot of people, so like I said, this character is in the main trilogy. So people who had read the trilogy already came in with like, ooh, we like this character and want to see like what brought her to the point that she's at in the series. Whereas other people were coming in more blind, um, and kind of seeing this sister dynamic. So what my goal, my intention of this story was, because it's like an estranged sister conflict at the heart of the story, which is, there's a lot of familial tension in the trilogy as well, but it wasn't so, the proximity is very different. And in terms of central conflict, it's much more subplot in the trilogy. This is front and center. And because of that, um, when people have a preconceived notion of, I like this character, so they naturally side with that character. But the
absolutely.
story is written in such a way that I try to play upon, like, this character is right. When you're in their head, in their perspective, they're right. But then when we get to the other character's perspective, who the readers who either didn't, haven't spent as much time in the trilogy or didn't know, um, they're like, wait, this also makes a lot of sense over here, and that's a lot of valid points I see. And now all of a sudden, it's not really about who's right and who's wrong. It's just, this is hard and this is tough, and I think that's usually what is the sticking point in a lot of relational, like, miscommunications and difficulties. Is it's not necessarily a matter of right and wrong. It's just, there's good points over here, there's good points over here. It's just difficult. It's a bad situation, two people trying to make the most of it in the way that makes sense to them. And sometimes, this story really explores generational trauma. And if a generational curse had a physical manifestation, and it impacted one person, how it not only impact them, how it impacts the people they're trying to have relationships with. And if you, until you deal with, that pain that's affecting you, it's going to color every relationship you have, for the negative. So thematically, it was a much darker story. It was a very different story. But people kind of expected that based on who this character is. So people who had read it were just like, wow, that was like a very emotional ride, but like it makes so much sense. Like it adds to the trilogy. So now I'm having people going, I want to go back and reread the trilogy with this context, which I love to hear because I wrote these stories with a degree of depth and foreshadowing and Easter eggs and all these little things to be reread because I'm a rereader. So that was great. And then the people who are completely new, who didn't necessarily come in with these like, I'm on this side or I'm on that side. I think they just got a, based on the reviews, a really good look into how I, view humanity. And the scope through which I write is always going to have kind of like a psychological bend of, we have to heal. We have to be willing to heal. We have to be willing to communicate. Um, Otherwise, hurt people are just going to hurt other people, and the cycle continues. So if we want to break those cycles, it usually starts with looking inward, and those themes are really, you know self-evident across the entirety. And even, looking at the covers thematically, the humility of the kneeling posture, I think that runs throughout the series. And subliminally readers understand like it's not going to be easy,
Nope.
but it is going to, challenge some aspects of what it means to live in right relationship with yourself and others.
Absolutely. And it seems to me that the outpour of responses have been very, very positive because, as you said, you've had readers who have now read this book and then have heard of this character in the trilogy. Now they get a better idea of who this individual is and her family and what it means to this universe that you have created, which I absolutely love because it reminds me of this. I don't want to say trope or cliche, but this literacy element where no one views themselves as the villains in their own story. In their story, there are heroes, and villains are just a constructed tool used by the hero or by society, it seems to me, which is honestly very, very cool. And that kind of leads into a reflective question, which I want to ask you, Tim, in that regard. So, as authors, writing a first book is not an easy endeavor, let alone writing a trilogy and then saying, okay, I'm done with this trilogy for a while. I'm going to take a break. But you have jumped right back into the fire and established a new book, a standalone book, which is set in the world, but following a character that really didn't get as much exposure in the trilogy, but we're now getting a chance to see her fleshed out. And I think that is incredible. But also with that in mind, with social media and trying to keep up with everything, that can be a huge strain on an author's mental health and their overall well-being. And also imposter syndrome is going to be there too, saying, why did you write again? You were done with this series. You didn't have to write anything more. You just wasted it. And they're also going to be, again, like with social media, goods and bads. The plus side is that you're now getting new readers who are now reading this book, who are maybe not so much on the historical fantasy side, but on the dark fantasy side. And this is their first window into your universe, which is good. But on the other side, as authors, we do leave ourselves exposed to trolls, spam, hate speech, and so forth. And again, that can also have a lot of strain on authors' mental health. So overall, Tim, with all that said, what has disciplined you to continue with this series? Because you know that, yes, the trilogy is done with that character, but the world is so rich that there are other characters to explore that I want to share with my readership.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that we can tackle within that question, because there's a lot to unpack. So first, in terms of like a mental health standpoint, um, I definitely I struggle with depression, and um, writing this story, because this required a rewrite um, shortly before even book one came out. Uh, my mother passed away,
Mm,
and this story in particular, it's on a cursed island where nothing truly dies and nothing truly lives. So the concept of what it means to live, the concept of dealing with death and loss and grief. So there was a lot of me that got poured into this story. So like there's a degree of that is therapeutic for me. I was working through this with a therapist. I actually had a therapist write the foreword of this book, to kind of, talk about, generational curses, and how to, um, family counseling, and the importance of it for not just yourself, but, others around you. So it was just a very it was a difficult story to write, but one that I felt was important to write. Um, I feel oftentimes that, we're positioned for a reason, like we're given a purpose and we're positioned for a reason to do something with that. So I do think as I had a creative responsibility to myself, and um, you know, I don't want to say to the world, but like, that's my role in this. Um I want to explore these stories. It's it's just as much for me as it is for my readers. I'd argue it's still more for me. I'm always going to write what I want to write, more so than I'm going to write what is, trending or hot or
mhm,
marketable. I follow my muse, and my muse is also, pain points. Like,
mm,
how can I tackle this head on, and how can I show others how to tackle it in their lives head on, and embolden them to do so. So I do think that there's a natural, um, almost competitive spirit in me of when this happens, when there's adversity, when there's trials and tribulations, like put your head down and get to work, roll your sleeves up, get your hands dirty, and go. And I definitely would say during, this time period, social media is the first thing that I'm just like walls up. I don't have the time, the energy, or the wherewithal for it. I'm very fortunate. I really have not had, there's always spam. You're like, there's no way you're not going to get spam, but I really haven't had many trolls. I really haven't had many negativity. And there's just a degree of, I truly like, I do this with the author coaching clients I have. Like, I write my author mission statement, which is, I'm going to write hopeful stories that explore the human condition, and help others to explore that aspect of themselves. So, like, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm aiming and intending to do. Sometimes does that fall short for some people? Sure, but that's okay too. You know what I mean?
mhm,
I focus on, um, if they might not like what I have to say about a certain thing, but if that seed can, if they read the book enough that seed can get planted, they might learn something along the way about themselves. And I really do think that's the point of storytelling. It's not necessarily, when you separate it from the commercialism and the consumerism that is running a business, that our society is very much, operates on, and like runs around. The creative process I try to keep it as separate as possible from the business aspect of it. And that was a hard transition to make.
Hmm.
I would say that was more difficult than like, why why do I want to stay in this world than write something else? Um, I think from, the standpoint, like, because the next book that I wrote is also based in this world, but kind of on the other side of the world. And the next story that I'll be working on, I'm hoping to start drafting in May. Um, it is, I don't want to say in the same world, but it is connected. Spiritually, it is connected. Um, so the events of, what happens in this series spiritually impacts the pantheon that affects this other world that I'll be, writing a story in. So I do think that that's just the way my mind works. It builds off of what it has, how, and looks for the connections, as opposed to like, all right, I'm done with this and I want to do something totally different. Like I want it to feel totally different to readers, new magic systems, new places, new cultures and themes to explore. But then there's going to be the little sprinklings of like, this, even like the words I used, I try to like create almost a subliminal pairing within the mind of like, I've seen these words before. What were they in reference to within the world, to just try to start creating some connections of that. I once again, it fits my worldview. I believe that everything is connected. Everyone is connected. So how do how can I leverage that in the storytelling and the world building and the character design and the themes that are explored, etc. So um, I do like I want to be a champion mental health awareness, and especially for depressed men. I feel like societally it's very difficult to um, be exposed, be vulnerable, and share um, the weaknesses that we have. I don't think that's necessarily something that is as accessible. And even though there's like, oh, you have to be vulnerable, share your feelings. Like once you do, people don't always necessarily like it. Oh, you're just
Absolutely.
being a victim. Like it's almost a double standard. And it's like there's a way in which to show up in that space. And I hope it serves as an invitation to allow others to do so. And that has nothing to do, it has nothing to do with books. I'm just using books as the vessel to try and impact that, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yes, it's almost like what I like to call the three E's: educate, entertain, and enlighten. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to writing our stories, we do want to entertain first and foremost. That is the primary goal. But that's not the only goal we have to settle on. We can educate our readers on topics, and we can enlighten them on themes that we think are important to share. And I've seen a lot of that in the newer books and the newer authors that have come up, which leads to a very fun question, which I'd like to hear your thoughts on, Tim. And my guests I've had on the show, I've shared this, which is there's been a debate I've noticed in the indie community and the publishing community in general that a golden age of creators has emerged from the quarantine lockdown years, those 4 years that happened because all of us were isolated. We couldn't go out, we couldn't interact with people, and we can only do so with calls like these every now and then. And to break the monotonous of boredom, we pretty much created our own material, whether that's our own books, our own music, our own artistry, and sometimes building our brand. However, I've had other people on the other side of the argument stating that a golden age was on the rise, but quarantine and lockdown just accelerated the process. I've even had people say that we're not in a golden age yet, but we are on the path to a golden age of creators. Tim, where would you say you fall on this argument, and what are your thoughts on it?
So it's really interesting, and I think that the impact that society has on people and the impact people have on society is at a very strange seesaw type moment, because nothing exists in a vacuum, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this concept of a golden age, I will say that self-publishing in general has made it more accessible for more creativity to be
Yes.
poured into and pushed out. Now, when we talk about a golden age, are we talking about a golden age of creativity, a golden age of publishing, a golden age of connectivity and community? And I'd argue that while there are more people now than ever that are writing and publishing, I would hesitate with golden. And the reason why I say that is the passion behind it. Is it driven by commercialism? And
Good point.
that's my fear, because if we look at it as in a golden age of there's more books, there's more money in publishing now than ever before. Sure, but what is the intention behind the work? And there's a lot of, simultaneously showing up in, bookish spaces and social media is like, oh, get politics out of my books. And it's like, you're missing the point. You're missing the point completely if you don't think that and I think you said it, beautifully. If you have entertain, educate, and enlighten, I call it a ladder of creative responsibility. And at
Right.
the base level, it's escapism. And then there's entertainment at the second rung. And then there's connection at the third rung. Then there's teaching at the fourth rung. And then there's challenging at the fifth rung. Like, stories should challenge the systems of our real world society, to
Right.
challenge how we view the world. And not all stories need to do that. But I feel like a lot of what is coming out now in this golden age of prolificness, there's a lot of volume of stories being created and being published. But is there a depth to these stories? And the other caveat to what's going on right now, and this is just the nature of what's happening socioeconomically. There's a, you know, author nation, formerly known as 20 books to 50K. 20 books. People are in a rush to get to 20 books to be able to go full time so that they can do what they want to do and follow their passion. But once upon a time, 20 books were achieved over a lifetime of work.
Yes.
And now it's a rush to the bottom to see how quickly can I just get full time. And you pair that with, AI art coming out, AI writing,
Hmm.
generative AI. And I fear that the golden age of content is actually diminishing the depth of engagement in stories. Now, it's my hope that creators, I do think that the reality is the creators who are in it for the right reasons are the ones who will last. Because if you're getting into this industry to make money, good luck.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Good luck. So if you're looking for a quick buck, if you're looking to satisfy a wounded ego, if you're looking to um, fill some void that you think like this will bring you X, Y, or Z. If you're creating from the wrong space, the wrong place within yourself, I good luck to you. I hope you find what it is you're looking for, but I don't believe it will outshine the people who create for the sake of creating because they love it. And so I'm hesitant to call the era we're in a golden age of content, because there's a lot of watered down, um, like almost it's a copy of a copy of a copy. There's a lot of
Mm.
derivative stuff coming out, and AI accelerates that, and the accessibility of self-publishing accelerates that. Um, so I'm almost more of, like with my author coaching clients, I begin with what, our first call is, what is the story on your heart and what do you have to say about it? Like what is going on in the world that you have something to say about? Because if you just want to entertain your audience, that is great, but I'm not the coach for you. I'm
Right.
going to look for, you've got to have more for me to want to work with you. And so I approach, um that's how I approach my writing. That's how I approach the books I want to read. So I don't know if this answers your question or if this is a cheap answer because I'm not accepting any of those choices, but I would argue that we're not in a golden age at all. And I would like to go back to the golden age where people created out of the love of creativity.
I like that. I like that answer, Tim, because it is probably it's the most different answer I've gotten to this question, which I love adding this to my roster of questions for all of my authors because it is true if you think about it. Yes, we are in a golden age if you think of the amount of content of self-published books. Yes, then you are correct in that regard. But the creative mindset behind it, are we there in that sense? You can argue not so much. And you also hit the nail on the head when it comes to AI art as well as AI written books, which I've had a lot of my colleagues absolutely despise with a passion because it deteriorates the creative process. I will be the first to say on camera, which I've said numerous times, I have used AI for the elements of my book that I don't write, like the outline, I use AI for. Character bios and character descriptions, I use AI for that. Character concept art, I've used an AI art generator. I'll be the first to admit that. But when it comes to writing the book itself, I have to do that because I know the story better than anyone else. You, Tim, know your story better than anyone else. So I absolutely love that answer you gave. And also, adding on to that, talk about, what are you really going into this industry for? When we talk about awards for books, I also feel that there's also discussion into that where some people who have won awards, and I want to use an example from a guest I had, Kurt Folster, who I had interviewed for another show, said that he didn't want the awards to be seen as like a pat on the back sort of validation. He wanted the awards to be like, okay, I've proven I can go the distance in this regard. I want to go forward. I want to use these as a stepping stone. For you and the awards that you've won, do you have that same mentality?
So here's the thing. So the concept of awards, right? This my jadedness is going to come out, so I apologize in advance.
No problem.
I feel like, and I'm sure you can understand this too. How often do you get in your inbox, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, like, hi, your book deserves a promotion, a spotlight, a this or that, and it's like my rates are very flexible, and it's like they're
Yes, too many to count.
it's infinite. It's like I get more of those messages than I get anything else. And so everyone's trying to make a quick buck. Everyone's trying to make money. And there's so many awards and certifying bodies and editorial review places, and it I think they're great. I just this past weekend I was at the Chanticleer International Book Awards. They host an author conference and a banquet. They have this wonderful little local bookstore that does a book fair the next day. It's a wonderful event with great people, and the amount of life experience in one room, just people getting the other authors I've gotten to talk to. It's an incredible event. It's super humbling, and it's super like just it's an honor to be a part of that community. Now, I'm mentioning them because I believe they're the exception. There are other awards that you can just apply to online.
Right.
You pay, you pay for, and someone will win. And how many applicants there are, who knows? And what is the vetting process in terms of how you move on, who knows? And like I've submitted to awards, but I'm doing it because I'm playing the game of exposure because they're going to post about it. And yeah, I'll be able to say, look at my blue ribbons back there. I don't know how much it matters. Um, I do think it's nice to be like, okay, a certifying body that reads a lot of books sees the merit in what I've done. I've already see the merit in what I've done. It's nice that it's recognized in others. I do think that it is a means of making money. And
Mm,
that's where I'm just kind of like, if, and this goes back to, you know, talking to writers, like in my author coaching, like, how do you want to publish? Do you want to go indie? Do you want to go traditional? And very often people look at traditional as like, well, I want to go traditional because I want to prove, I have something to prove. I'm like, that's the wrong reason to go traditional.
yes.
The wrong reason to go traditional. I understand where the sentiment comes from, but you should take that pride in your work regardless of how you publish. You should take that same pride in your work, and you should educate yourself to put out a traditional publishing quality novel. Because there is, talking about, the golden age of content and the, in terms of volume, not all not all books are created equally. Not all books receive the same amount of time, energy, input from people who have made their career about doing this. How many people have put in their 10,000 hours, participated in the creation of your story? You know what I mean?
Right.
So, we're talking about the pressure cooker of, the COVID quarantine era. And, people are like, I wrote a book and now I want to put it out there. It's like, this is your first book. And this is the first time you've written anything since high school. Um, and there's a lot of good in here. I'd highly encourage you, go back to the drawing board with an open your eyes to some new things. Here are some things that you can add to your writing to elevate the craft, to elevate the prose, to learn about story structure, to be more eloquent with your themes and not so heavy-handed. Like, there's so many little things that you don't know until you know, and you can't see until you've learned. And that learning process, that maturation, has a gestation period that was not accelerated just because you had, a year to write. And I do think that that's kind of a caveat. So the awards, similar to traditional publishing, it is not, what a good book is. You do, because you've read it and you've felt it. Can you compare yourself to that authentically, organically, believably, honestly, and feel like I have done my absolute best in getting this where it can be? um, I believe all indie authors should do that. And there's a degree of, it's an expensive industry. You are
Yes.
going to have to, if you're doing it yourself, and this is why I'm like, if you don't have any money to put into your work, that's where traditional publishing is great, because they're going to take on those costs. All those upfront costs go away. So, like, and that, you're going to learn a lot because you're going to get a lot of rejection. It's the school of hard knocks. Whereas in the indie space, I mean, some of the best books I've written are by indie authors, because they have studied craft. They have spent the time, the energy, they've hired editors. I understand that that's not accessible to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is where, like, it's going to take time. Publishing is an investment. Are you investing your time in traditional publishing, or are you investing your money in self-publishing? But in either case, the due diligence is on the creator. I'd say there's more of a, you know, diligence and responsibility on the indie side of it, because there aren't barriers to entry. On the side of in traditional publishing, you have agents that are a barrier to entry. You have publishers that are a barrier
Right.
to entry. So, it weeds out a lot of the less than stellar stories that are not quite ready. Indie, the self-publishing space, does not have that. Um, and so if you are putting out the first thing that you wrote, slapping a the end on it and hoping to get an award, to validate yourself, um, I'm sure there is an award you can find that you can win. How reputable is it? Who knows? But they will gladly take your money. And so I ask again, why why are you writing this? What are you creating for? And what place does it have in your psyche? Um, if you operate from a wounded place and you're looking for external validation to shore that up, oof, you're probably not writing a story that is enlightening anyone, is my point. If
Mm.
you're creating from that place.
Absolutely. And you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, that is probably one of the best answers I've gotten thus far in any interview. And that actually perfectly segues into the business portion of the interview, Tim, which I now want to focus on your role as an author coach and working with authors and really helping them understand the business a little bit better. And I think you hit the nail on the head for some of the questions I was going to ask you. But for one question, which I think is important, how have you helped the clients you worked with really understand who their audience is and their readership? Because I definitely feel those two are very different, because the audience is the broad group within the genre, and the readership is, okay, marketability and market wise, who's actually going to pick up this book? Because there are four grades of readership. There's middle grade, which is for children, YA, which is for young adults. But let's be honest, there have been some YA books that kind of teeter to the NA and AF. NA is, of course, new adult, which is that transitional period. And AF is, of course, adult fiction. And each readership has its own set of rules and expectations that authors really need to understand. So, how have you helped clients understand that aspect of the writer's process? And in your opinion, Tim, when should an author consider those two? During the drafting phase or during the, I wouldn't say publishing phase, but near the end of the writing phase towards the marketing phase?
So this is something that I have very particular thoughts on.
Okay.
I am of the belief, begin with the end in mind. And so, because that is how I operate on almost everything, that's kind of the flow and the format in which I begin my author coaching sessions. So, before, if you're drafting and trying to figure out who you're writing for, who you are and who you're writing for, it's too late. Forget publishing. If you're thinking about it then, it's too late. And it's never too late. You have to do the work at some point. But the
Right.
best time to start is before you've put pen to paper on this particular project. And I think that comes down to who you are first, who you
Right.
are. So, like, once again, what do my stories do? I want to showcase the human perseverance and resilience through the challenges of life, through the darkness, in a hopeful and a story oriented towards hope. Now, I'm going to explore different aspects of the human condition in each story. Whether it's book one was a concept of learning identity. Book two was a death of expectations. Book three was like, how do you forgive yourself in order to redeem what you've
Mm.
done wrong? Ghost of Rainia is forgiving yourself to make right with others. To one of the taglines is divided, ruin will reign. So it's all about coming together. But to come together and come together in a way that's meaningful, you have to heal here first. So all of my stories, I'm trying to, dig a layer deeper into what is the wound that needs healing? What is the wound that needs, light shined on? Um, so it begins with your author mission statement. Why do you want to tell this story? And if you have that in mind, that the answer to that question is probably going to answer who your target market is. And then we can extrapolate and go and take that a layer deeper. Okay, so I have one who is um, writing a story that is a a sibling dynamic, a brother and a sister. an estranged brother and sister who are hunting down the bandits that took a woman's child,
Mm.
right? So, the crux of the story is, you know, the sibling dynamic. So, I ask her, what about this story is most important to you? And she's like, I want to showcase, for a brother and sister, as divided as they are, that together they can mend past this wounded relationship, um and make something good come from it to pass along to the next generation. And I'm like, great. So right there, if we look at if you know that about yourself and about the story you want to tell, who is that going, like, we can, okay, middle grade, that's not going to happen. Young adult, that's not going to happen. This is already an adult audience, just by nature of that thematic, the depth of theme. We know who that target audience is. So now here's your homework. This is before we even start drafting. Find other books that inspired these ideas. What shelves are they on? Who wrote them? How long are they? What other genre norms and conventions are at play? So doing all of this research beforehand, I'm not saying you have to keep, put people in a box, but it is a business.
Right.
And marketability and creative passion exist on a spectrum. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to decide where you are on this spectrum. If you are saying, I'm going to write to market, and right now fairies and fae and smut is and spice is really popular, so I'm going to write to the market, but you're not passionate about it, guess what? The audience that is captive for that thing
Yes.
doesn't care, because they can see through that you don't care.
Absolutely. You hit the nail right on the head, Tim, which is absolutely true. If you are trying to write to market, your readership or the readership that likes those kind of books, they're going to know that you're not passionate about it. You're trying to, hitch that gravy train, which, here's the thing, writing for market is not usually a good idea because you're never going to make it. You're going to miss the trend. You have to think of the market ahead of time. And I also like what you said that, understanding, your goal and your objectives as an author, because I definitely feel there is this tightrope balance between an author's individuality, wanting to showcase their talent as the writer, the author, but they also have to understand they're writing in a genre that already has a particular style. Even if different authors have made their own voice in that genre, there's still a set of, I wouldn't say instructions, but there are guidelines that exist in each genre. Case in point, high epic fantasy, it's going to follow the reins of, some would argue, like Brian Sanderson, J.R. Tolkien, George R. Martin. And yes, each of those authors have their own approach to the genre, but they still follow the same beat. It's epic, it's grand, it's going to have characters, it's going to have these dynasties, these family trees, this world building that, to what you said, Tim, allows the reader to escape. It's very different from a thriller outline or a thriller style of storytelling or noir or westerns or so forth. So we really have to understand, why we're getting into this industry. And to further add to that, do you want to be a writer who writes for a passion, or do you want to be a commercial writer, which is, again, a different mentality? Which ultimately comes to this question, which I think you've answered it, but maybe you can go more in depth on it, which is, you know, overall, I think I may have told you this the last time you were on the show. I've been doing this podcast now for about 7 years. I've interviewed like a whole bunch of authors from hybrid, indie, traditional, upcoming, debuting, etc. I've learned a lot from all of them, you included as well. And ultimately, I've come to the belief and the understanding that in the world of publishing, there are two paths: to be an author, to be known as an author. One's dedicated to the craft, the other dedicated to marketability. Both have the same objective, which is literacy acclaim, world renowned success. and each has its set of obstacles and hurdles. But, which I'm sure you've probably told to your clients, you have to be realistic and understand this is not a get rich quick money scheme. And yes, there are exceptions to the rule, of course. There are authors who were able to make a career from their first book or their first series. All the power to them. But generally speaking, that's not the case for every author. And they really have to understand their goals, their realistic goals. So, Tim, how have you helped a client really understand this point that there is no guarantee in this industry their book is going to be the start of their legacy, because every author believes it's original, it's something that's very, very different, which is not true. The same story has been told numerous times over, just reinvented and so forth. And with all that said and more, that shouldn't stop them from honing their craft if they truly understand their goals and objectives and they're going into this industry for the right reasons.
Yeah. And this is again, this first call that I do with people is pretty intensive. It's like, I try to assess, what do you value about yourself? Is it your talent? Is it your creativity? Or is it your grit? Because this journey, talent, talent can be acquired.
Right.
Creativity can be trained. It is a muscle that can be trained. But I can't teach you work ethic. I can't teach you to show up consistently. I can give you some tips and tricks to kind of, make it happen, but only you can show up for you. And the journey of becoming an author, regardless of success, we're talking about just finishing a first draft, right? That is a hard labor of you need to show up consistently.
Right.
Put pen to paper. And I'm not saying it's a good first draft. I'm saying it's a finished first draft. So that understand that, most people write 500 words an hour. If you want to write 100,000 words, that means you're going to have to invest 200 hours. And that's without all of the prep work I'm going to ask you to do about who am I as a creative? What genre am I writing in? What type of world does my story require? What cast of characters does my story require? What type of plot and story, like plot archetypes and story vibes, am I trying to commingle to create a unique story? And what theme am I trying to bring readers to so that they have a cathartic ending? All of this before putting pen to paper. So if it's going to be 200 hours of drafting at a minimum for a 100,000 word novel, plus all of that on the back end, we're probably looking at between 400 hours, 200, 250, depending on, like, some people speed through that. But I'd say 200 to 400 hours before you have a finished first draft. And then how many first drafts are that clean? And how
Nope.
close are they to publication? Not.
Nope.
So now let's, editing, revising, learning, editing, revising. That can take a couple times. Few writers in the beginning understand that editing has four parts: developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, proofreading. So, like, you're going to be going through this for the next 1,000 hours. I don't care if you're talented. I don't care if you're creative. In some capacities, talent can lead you astray and creativity can distract you. Do you have the grit to see this through?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that now more than ever, especially in this golden age of creation, content creation, it's those who have the stomach for it, who are creating from a good place. So I try to assess that from the very first call, because there's only so much I'm going to be able to teach that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And, like, listen, life gets in the way. That kind of stuff happens. But do you find your way back? Do you keep coming back, or is this just a flavor of the week thing that you thought would be cool? It would be
Mm.
cool to write a book, you know? Okay. let me know when you find the time, the energy, and the care. Because if you're waiting on motivation, it's motivation is a fickle, fickle, fickle muse.
Yes, which
So
it's which is why I say, like, I always ask my guests, like, what does discipline you? I always used to say what motivates you, but I've changed it to where what has disciplined you to continue writing. And honestly, Tim, I got to get you in call with an author I had earlier this year. Her name is Tatum Carrington. To this day, she's the youngest author I've had featured on the show, still in high school. And
wow.
she has the work mentality that you would love. She's already, she's very disciplined. She already knows what she wants to do. She understands the marketability. She even took a marketing class to help her book. I mean, who thinks of that? And she's already sold. Last time I spoke with her, she's already sold 500 copies. She's still in high school. That is incredible. So I got to get you in touch with her because I definitely think you two working together would be an amazing dream team. And on that topic of networking and connecting, I know earlier in the call before we started, you did mention the incredible person who helped, created your covers. And in your previous interview, you also mentioned the talented editors that you worked with who helped bring your stories to life. So, over the past year or so, are there any other people that you've added to your inner circle that we'd like to give a personal shout out to who have helped you not only refine your trilogy, but have also brought the standalone novel to life?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always, listen, and they say networking is everything. It is.
It
It
is.
is. It is. And for everyone who's an introverted writer and think that you can do this alone, for you, I say this: if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you're going to need people to go with. So if you want to go far, go together. And the people that I've found to go with, whether it's my audiobook narrator, new editors that come in, depending on like copy editing it, or like different stages of the editing process. Um, Printers, like, I mean, having a contact for, hey, I need bookmarks, I need more bookmarks, I need these art prints done, I need a banner for, I need like a tablecloth for my table. Like, you're gonna need people, and it should be about relationships. It
Absolutely.
should be about relationships, not just like I need something so I want to have someone to go to. Build relationships with people. So my narrator, Landon Solberg, I he is a phenomenal human being. He is a phenomenal creative. He has the heart and soul for creativity, for connecting with authors, for um like finding the heart of their story and bringing that out in audiobook form. It's the passion he puts into every voice print, every different character that he does. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before. Um, and then I connected with Ali B Edits on social media. She does all the different stages of the editing process. She's super sweet. I had her in my Discord to give a guest lecture. Super knowledgeable about all the steps that it takes to, go from concept to a published story
Right.
that you're proud of. And so you just like that little black book of people, it goes on and on and on. And I'd also uh, David Beaumier, who is a reviewer and organizer at the Chanticleer Reviews. He's just one of these people who has an infectious personality that is just the passion he has for story exudes in every action that he has, every word that he says. And These are the types of people that you want to go with because they will continue to inspire you. And it's through these relationships that like it Tyrion Lannister talks about like books are a whetstone to, sharpen the mind. Relationships are the whetstone that forges the sword of that you're trying to wield in your storytelling journey. So it begins with relationships, it continues with relationships, it ends with relationships. Whether your people should always be learning and you don't learn in isolation, or you learn from the school of hard knocks. If you don't want that to be your learning journey, then it's through people, it's through others, it's through shared experience that you can expedite that process. You can let others make mistakes for you. You don't need to make all of your own mistakes. So it's in community that happens, and that's why, like, I'm very passionate about. I've created a Discord server that has readers, it has writers, it has industry professionals, and we have to come together and we have to be able to help each other because we all have passion in this. So let's put it to good use.
Incredible, Tim. Absolutely incredible. And a final ending to this amazing author interview. With everything you've learned from our last interview to now, what is your word of wisdom to the writers and authors just starting their careers right now?
Find community. I think you will learn so much more. um there's so many like good resources out there. There's so many, like we talk about the golden age of content. There's so much good content out there, and now it's just a matter of finding the voices that resonate with you. Find the people that you want to partner with, because when I started writing, I honestly believed this is something that I can do on my own and it will be cheap. And I was wrong on both accords. I couldn't do it on my own. I could for a little while, but if you want to elevate to this is the best thing that I can produce, you'll get to a ceiling. Then you'll need to bring people in. And then that ceiling raises. Then you bring more people in. Then that ceiling raises. So there's a lot of hats you need to wear in this industry. You can't wear them all. You can't learn to be the best at all of them at once. And it's through community and shared experiences that you can start to almost cheat the system. You don't need to make the same mistake as others. You don't need to invest the same time, energy, money, other resources to get to the same place if you partner with the right people. So, this is a great resource. I mean, right here, these sorts of conversations and interviews that you're listening to, it starts here. So if you are starting out, follow Gabriel, continue to follow Gabriel, follow people like Gabriel, follow the people Gabriel recommends, because you're already doing so, and just don't lose sight of that, because it never gets any less important to have the community behind you.
Couldn't agree more, Tim. Couldn't agree more. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude another amazing author interview here on the Wandering Scribe YouTube channel. A huge thank you to my friend Tim for coming back on the show and telling us all about his standalone novel in the world of his trilogy, as well as his brand as an author coach. Now, Tim, where can people find you on social media to connect, as well as purchase copies of your books? And are there any upcoming events or festivals that we should look out for 2025?
Absolutely. So my link tree has everything on it, so I can share that with you, just to make it accessible. But I'm on TikTok mostly. I am on Instagram. I am on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. I have a Patreon for my writing groups and my author coaching courses. So you can get them and do them at your own pace, or if you want to get them and do it in a live cohort, you can do that as well. Um, I have a Discord. The Discord is where I want to nurture. That's where I spend the most of my time nurturing that community. So the social media is to try to bring you to, and then the Discord server where we have the writing groups, where we have the book clubs, where we have the hangouts. That's really where the networking can take place. So that's where I try to say, like, come hang out here. Um, my books are available on Kindle Unlimited. They're available on Audible. Amazon is probably the easiest place. If you don't want to buy on Amazon and you want to support me directly, you can contact me. I'm always happy. Like, my stuff is on TikTok Shop, but it's not the easiest or most accessible place. So you can always contact me directly, say, hey, I want to order books. I can send you an invoice and send the books out to you directly. So that's probably the best way to get signed copies. I'll be in the process of setting up more of like a typical direct sales storefront. That'll be happening in the coming year. And then future events, this one's just around the corner, May 9th and 10th in Mesa, Arizona. I'll be at a event called Enemies and Lovers. It's hosted by Tea and Tropes. It's the first of its kind. It's the first of by this company. I'm super excited for it. Pierce Brown, the author of Red Rising, is like the keynote author and featured author who will be there, and he's one of my favorites. So I'm super stoked on that. That is the only one I have in the short-term future. I'd have to look and see what else I have on schedule for the rest of the year, but I have a lot of writing to do for the rest of this year. So that's I don't know how many more events I'll do this year. I want to get back to the writing room, and hopefully I want to have at least one more book out before the end of the year. I might have two.
Nice. I will link all that down below in the description of this video, as well as tagging Tim's first interview, his first time on the show, right over here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another amazing author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Huge thank you to Tim for coming back on the show and telling us all about his book, as well as his services as an author coach. And if you're an author and that needs guidance, definitely reach out to Tim to schedule a meeting with him. With that in mind, he'll be more than happy to help you out, to really set you straight, to really help you understand exactly the industry a little bit better from his experiences and from what he has learned. And as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. This is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world.